this new series of Grow 2018, which is all about the acrostic. Come on now. Don't let me down. Yeah. Where we're going to start with generosity, standing with the G, the R is responsibility, O is outreach, and the W is wrestle. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this first one, just because this series goes a number of weeks. And they do such a great job of encapsulating the message, and I'm going to try to take that then and to expound on it a little bit during my part of the morning, and help us to understand a little more what it means to be generous, God-fearing, God-serving Christians. First of all, I'd like to ask how many of you followed through on the homework from last week? How many of you remembered there was homework? Yeah, probably not. But I want you to take that seriously. What we were supposed to do last week was to pray, earnestly seek God's face in examining our own heart. Remember, Ray said there that the gift represents the giver. You open the gift and you see the heart. So I wanted you to really go before God and seek His face and ask Him, what kind of a Christian giver, generous person are you, and if He needed to minister to you in a specific area. So we'll let you by on that one, but this week's I want full participation, but probably can't get quite all that. Did you take note of the verse that Ray shared there that David said in 2 Samuel? Remember, this is when King David was wanting to buy some land, some property to build an altar on, and he was talking to the man that was selling it, and he said, well, there's a title for this morning, by the way. But he said this, and it's kind of backwards in our English, but I think we understand what it says. David said, "No, but I will surely buy it from you." The guy wanted to give it to him. David said, "No, but I will surely buy it from you for a price. Nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which costs me nothing." He was not wanting to give something cheap to the Lord. He wanted to represent what he was giving of his heart back to God, and so he would not take it for free. There is a cost to generosity. This morning we're going to be talking about the cost versus the reward, because there's also great reward in being generous. Maybe some of you are going to ask yourself, well, can I really afford to be generous? You know, when we open our wallet, when the offering plate is coming our way and we see $1 and a $5 and maybe a 20 in there, and we need to make a choice on the bill or bills we're going to put in the plate, as the plate's coming at us, where we panic and quickly have to decide, I just can't take a chance on getting through this week without the bigger bills, or, this cause isn't worth that much money, and so we take the 1 or we take the 5 and we throw that in. Several things are wrong with that approach. First of all, no one should put themselves in that kind of tense situation where, as the plate's coming at you got to make a decision what you're going to give, because the Bible gives us recommendations not to do that. It says instead in 1 Corinthians 16, it says, on the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper. So we're to plan ahead of time. That means last Sunday you would have decided what you were going to give in the offering plate this morning. And so when the plate come your way, that was already taken care of. Your check was written out last Sunday, and it went in the plate today, right? We probably don't go quite that far, but that's the way God wants us to think about giving, because we then have a better chance of reflecting on what He has done to us, and now it's our privilege to give it back to Him. Not only makes giving much easier, but it helps you reflect on God's generosity to you. However, when we choose the $20 bill that's there, even if you don't know how everything will get paid for this week, you're focusing on the blessing which you are allowing God to perform with what you have left. Mr. Donovan in that clip was brought up short with his son's generosity. He couldn't get that plane away from the kid, but the kid, when he felt the need and he wanted to give from his heart, it was an easy and a loving thing to give. And then that was a lesson that kind of hit this guy up alongside the head, because he didn't think that way. He'd always looked at his giving as an expense, where you had to kind of decide, can I afford this or not? You remember where he said, the missionaries are coming back, oh, so that must mean that I don't have to pay that out anymore, right? That expense is going to go away. So his view was not generous. It was a need that he had to meet, because that was just expected of him. And so hence he would give the watch from his desk drawer, which had next to no value to him after having that Rolex on his wrist. He'd never go back to that watch. So it didn't mean much of anything to him. So it was easy for him to give, because it could be an expense right off. His son and even his wife, however, saw that their giving wasn't an expense, it was an asset. I'm talking in some accounting terms here, but an asset is something of value that is owned by you or owned by somebody. And so when they gave, whether it was the party or whether it was giving the plane, they were giving an asset to an individual that meant something, that was a blessing to them. By being generous and giving the best that he had, the little guy was gaining the asset of a new friend and a new relationship. What he gave didn't even seem to enter into the equation. He didn't seem to think twice about giving his very best. And I so wonder what Mr. Donovan did with that whole watch thing. Did he give the Rolex? Did he give the worthless gift? Did he give nothing? What would you have given? I guess that's what I really want to know, is what would we have done in our hearts when that lesson hit us up alongside the head of what we should be, how generous we should be. We don't know, but we do know he has a lot to learn about being generous in the weeks ahead, and there's going to be a lot of lessons that are learned. But this was a major lesson. Someone in the Bible who knew a lot more about generosity than any of us know is found in our text this morning in 1 Samuel, if you want to turn there. 1 Samuel is the chapter 1 is a very familiar story of the Jewish family, a man and his wife, a man who had several other handmaidens or whatever that were part of the household, but it's mostly focusing on Elkanah and his wife Hannah, who were childless. And though they had wanted desperately and cried out for the Lord longingly for many years, they were not able to become pregnant. Some of you have maybe been down that road, and you can identify with what they were feeling. But though they faithfully followed the Lord, they kept all the feasts, they annually went up and did what they were supposed to do, faithfully sacrificed, I think, good sheep, not the smelly, stinky sheep. Yet God seemed to not be concerned about their barrenness. And Hannah was so serious about her distress, even crying out before the Lord in the tabernacle. Notice verse 10 and 11, where she says, she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. So she was very serious. This was a heart cry, a soul heart cry to the Lord for a need that she wished to be made. And she even made a vow to the Lord that if he would do for her and bless her with what she was asking, he would or she would give it back to the Lord. Talk about cost versus reward. What would be the reward in that? This is something she's wanted all her life. And if the Lord would only give it to her, she says, no, I'll give it right back to you. Amazing, the kind of generosity that I see there. And this was not a Timex or a Rolex kind of decision. This was a gift versus giver decision that she had made. This was not a seed of faith so that the Lord can bless you with so much more, like we hear a lot of TV preachers saying today. If you only sow this amount of seed, then the Lord's going to multiply that and bless you multiply in many different ways. It wasn't that kind of faith. It was just simple obedience to what God is asking. And he wasn't even asking, but what she willingly was going to give back to him. This was a complete sellout in agreement to give her very best as soon as God would give it to her. And they worshiped, they went home, and life happened. Verse 20, in the process of time. I like that because it lets me know it didn't happen immediately. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived. I don't know how long it was. It probably was in that year's time because we'll see later on she didn't go up to the tabernacle the next year. So it might have been within that year. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe there were some years in there that we don't know. So we don't know how long she had to wait. She was sincere. She cried before the Lord. Her soul was in anguish. And yet they went home and in the process of time. How many of you deal with that in your life? That you just, where's God? Why doesn't he answer? I really need him to be here, and yet he's not making himself known. Oh, I wish I knew how long she had to wait, but evidently it happened because it says then she got pregnant, a great answer to her prayer, but then she had 9 months of thinking about what she had promised. It seems like her faith never wavered during that time, but maybe you're saying it's easy to promise generosity, but when reality hits and you have to, look at that stack of bills compared to the amount of money you've got to pay it with, and then to follow through with what you've promised, you might need to change that a little bit, depending upon circumstances. How many of you ever had to do that, where you said, Lord, I know you have required this, or you want this out of me, but man, I'm up against a tight thing here, and I can't pay you right now. I have to pay you later. Do we do that to God? I think sometimes we do. We all know of women who have struggled to get pregnant, or they're single mothers or whatever. Probably the single mothers is what I was thinking of, that have gotten pregnant, and then they come up to the point of birth, and they want to give away the baby, and yet when they hold that precious little child for the first time, their heart just melts, and they can't give it up after all. They change their mind. I don't know if Hannah struggled with that or not. I would think that would be normal. But we don't see anything of her wavering in her faith. She made the vow, she made the promise, and she was committed to carry it through. Look at these verses 21. Now the man, Elkanah, and I spelled that wrong, I guess, and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, not until the child is weaned, then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. Is she having second thoughts? Why is she not going? I think even Elkanah was a bit afraid of that, because he says that sounds reasonable for you to keep him until he's weaned, but then he says something which I believe is a tremendous principle when it comes to generosity. Verse 23, he says, do what seems best to you, wait until you have weaned him. Only, and I can see him saying, but oh man, only let the Lord establish his word. Do you get it? When we do our part and follow through with our vow, our pledge, our gift, that then allows God to have a wonderful opportunity to reward in a marvelous way. So she's giving her gift and then allowing God to reward. But conversely, when we withhold what we owe the Lord, the promise of the Lord to bless is hindered. We let the Lord establish His word when we generously give back to the Lord what He has entrusted to us to take care of. I don't think she was struggling with what she was going to do. I think she was just being practical. A baby needs to have his mother's milk and needs to be taken care of for a certain amount of time. And so she was saying, when that's done, we'll both go. I don't want to go this time and then bring him back. When I take him, I want him to stay. I want him to be there. So, but I just find that word from Elkanah very important for us. How do we let the Lord establish His word through our generosity? If He has given you the gifting to be a teacher and to impart to your hearers what God has taught you, you're letting the Lord establish His word through your gracious use of your gift. You're generously giving out what He has given to you. When you give up something which is of value to you that someone else can be blessed by, you are letting the Lord establish His word through the outcome of that gifting. Again, you're giving it an asset rather than an expense. I still think that my suggestion this week, which kind of fell flat, but I thought it was a great suggestion for us as a church to help out the Bursley family whose home was heavily damaged by a fire this week. That'd be a good thing for us to invest some of the Lord's money into their need. It's a community family. They often spend the same time as we do at the campgrounds and at Shady Green Pastures. In fact, they've shared meals with us. They've been at some of our church services. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to put in practice what we're talking about. And to be honest, it was a bit of a test to see how sensitive we are to needs around us. But I put that up, I think, on Monday or Tuesday of this week. The last time I looked, I think 30 of us had looked at it, read the note, looked at the picture, which is on our church page, but not one commented that you thought it would be a good thing to do. I think Dale hit the like button. But that kind of surprised me, that we're not any more sensitive to a need in our community that we could be a part of. So I think we got some learning to do here. Now I know I can certainly help them myself. We talked about this in Sunday school. I can help them myself and give them, but I thought it would be great for us to feel that need from a group. And I'm just hoping this series sensitizes us to respond quickly when we see the needs around us. And I'm so glad for what we got in the budget, because we got a fund there now that's money's sitting there waiting to be used. We just got to tap it and get it out to the need. So anyway, that was just something I was a little disappointed in this week. And I know you don't all see the internet, you don't all see that page, so I'm not judging you. I'm just saying it was kind of an example, and it was kind of an eye-opening experience to me to see where we're at in the whole area of generosity. Only God knows what the results will be when we do our part, and we shouldn't be concerned about what we should really want to see God establish. But what we should really want to see is God establish His word through our faithfulness. Well, in our text here, Hannah had no intention of not following through on her vow to the Lord. It just made sense for her to mother her son and to stay until he could make it on his own. Then it says this in verses 24 to 28. Now when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. I don't know his age. Like I say, I don't know how much time occurred between here. Then they slaughtered a bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I ask of him. Therefore I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he should be lent to the Lord." So they worshiped the Lord there. No spotted, scrawny, stinky sheep for this sacrifice. She gave her very best. Was it a cost or was it a reward? In our human reasoning, we would think that God surely rewarded her with many more children for her generosity, right? She gave her firstborn, so certainly there's many more to follow. You know, from what I could tell, Samuel was an only child. There were some other men by that name, but their fathers were all different. So I think she gave up the only child that she had. Am I wrong on that? She did have more? Okay. I would like to see that because I looked up both Hannah and I looked up Elkanah, and there was nothing referred to offspring, so it wasn't under their names. But show me afterwards. I'd like to see that. So, okay, scratch that. But she didn't know that when she gave. She didn't know that she was going to get any more. So it's only out of the God's goodness that she was blessed. But what an asset to God's kingdom. The reward that she got every time she would think about her son who was doing something that she couldn't do, and yet he was being the master's servant and filling a role and leading his people, his special people, in a way that no one else could. What a reward that would be. What an asset that must have been built into her life. And that tells me that the reward we can expect from being generous is not necessarily going to be a blessing of receiving more of what we just gave away. This was because I was thinking she didn't get any more. But it also tells us that those TV preachers who promise if you sow a seed, you'll reap a harvest of what you sow, that's faulty theology, and that they're no doubt phonies as well by putting that out there. That's not what God has promised. He just has called us to be generous, to give as He's blessed us, and let the results up to Him. Like I said, it was a reward of obedience, but God has promised to reward us just as Hannah was rewarded, like I said, every time she thought about what her gift was doing. She gave back to God what God gave to her, and now what she gave was being used mightily by God as the people's special leader. You know, Mary and I have practiced the scriptural suggestion of tithing for many years, as far back as I can remember, actually. But I determined a long time ago that I needed to figure out what our income was going to be for the year, and then at that point decide I don't like figuring every week what I'm supposed to do, so I do it at the beginning of the year. And every week I know exactly what is going to be given back to the Lord, unless it's something more, but I know that the minimum amount. And every week that check goes out. I have to admit there's been some weeks that it has gone out when the resources are not there to cover. I think we probably even bounced some charitable giving checks, which isn't very smart, but I think it's happened. But they've been covered, and the Lord has blessed, and we've tried to remain obedient to doing what He has suggested from us. Now, have I seen my bank account balloon because of being obedient to what God has asked for? No. A lot of people say that, we've been so blessed financially because we've given, and I've not really experienced that in my life, but have I been blessed? You bet. The Lord has taken care of us in so many, many ways that we can't even count. So I know that the principle works. I know that His promises are true. But God would and has blessed because of what we have done. And I know many of you have experienced that as well. I'm just thrilled at the way He takes care of His people when they are obedient. And as I was compiling the contribution reports of all of you last night, by the way, I didn't get them done because we had a birthday party yesterday that ran all day that I wasn't even aware of, or we forgot about. We're getting old and we can't remember our grandchildren's birthday parties. We thought it was next week. So my day was really messed up yesterday, but I was trying to get these things done last night, working late and early this morning, trying to compile the totals of what you've given for the year. And I was especially blessed, as I was reminded again, to see some of you young people getting the vision to tithe your income. Give back to the Lord some of what you have earned. You know, the tendency would be, man, I'm a young person. I'm earning this income. It's mine. I've got a sports car I want to buy and all those kinds of things that we want to add to our portfolio, which is pretty small at that stage, but it's there. But I'm thrilled that you're seeing the vision of what God has asked us to do. So keep that before you. That's generosity in its infancy probably, but it's something that God can use to grow. So determine early in the week. This is what I want you to take. Determine early in the week what you're going to give. Give big so that the word of the Lord can be established, and focus on the reward, not on the cost, not on the expense. Focus on the reward. So, homework. What I'd like each of you to do this week is to do something out of the ordinary, generous, to a stranger. It might be paying for somebody's coffee that's behind you, or paying for the next person's meal. It might be paying for somebody's groceries that are ahead of you. I don't know. You're a lot more smart at figuring those kinds of things out. But some opportunity that comes until we do this again the next time, I'd like each of us to have an experience to share. And I want to hear your experiences. I don't have to do all the talking through this series. I want it to be a interaction kind of thing. So go out into this world, be a blessing, be generous, and then come back and tell us next time what you experienced, what that did for you. Because I'm thinking, I'm betting. No, I'm not betting. I'm believing that you are going to gain more than what you give away. Not financially maybe, but in here. Tomorrow. No, I think in 2 weeks, but I don't know. Might be before, and by the way, Jesus might come before, so it'd be good to get it done ahead of that. So let's pray. Thank you, Father, for what you give to us. You're a generous